Now, 20 years ago, armed rebel forces toppled the government of Somalian President Mohammed Siad Barre. Barre snatched power in 1969 by way of a coup and ruled the East African country for nearly 22 years. But despite multiple efforts to normalize the country, including the establishment of the transitional federal government in 2004, the country remains in turmoil. The Islamic militant group Al-Shabaab has challenged the interim government for control of many parts of the country, including the nation's capital, Mogadishu. And now we're pleased to be joined in our studio by Harun Maruf, senior editor of Voice of America's Somali service, which launched a week-long series examining Somalia's route to state collapse. Welcome to the show, Harun.
Thank you.
So take us back to when the ouster of Mr. Barre happened back in 1991. Some credit him for doing a lot of good in the country. He built roads, universities, but also he was described as a brutal dictator. So lead us up to the events.
He was a brutal dictator. When he came to power, as you mentioned, in 1969, he has done a lot of good things. He built the infrastructure, he created a lot of universities. He has written the first Somali language script for the first time in the history. And that's why the Somali language is developing at the moment, thanks to him. But that was the first 10 years. He antagonized the Soviet Union, his main backers, and the African Union by invading Ethiopia in 1976. And that war has led ultimately to his fall, because the Somali army was defeated in the war. And then in 1978, the demoralized army officers tried to overthrow him. And then when the coup failed, they created the first army rebel groups inside Ethiopia. And these army rebel groups and Siad Barre failed to come together and solve the problems. And because he was not giving in a lot, the rebels succeeded finally to defeat him in 1991. Thereafter, it was very clear that the rebel groups did not have any national agendas. They were not united. So one of the groups has chosen its own leader for Somalia, and all the other rebel groups have refused to recognize him as a leader. And then we have had Somaliland seceding in 1991. In May, there was the start of the civil war in Mogadishu in 1991, and from there on, the chaos has started. We had the hunger, which killed more than 300,000 people in 1992 in Somalia. The chaos that started in 1991 is still ravaging the country.
It's still ravaging the country. It's literally spiraled out of control. A lot of people, in fact, even your current president, Mr. Sheikh Sharif Sheikh Ahmed, described the country as, you know, in tatters. Well, now there have been many efforts to try to normalize the situation, local, international interventions, even the Djibouti peace agreement that brought in the National Federation government, yet nothing seems to be working yet. So what are the obstacles?
The problem is there were a number of international mediation. 15 peace conferences were held in and outside Somalia to find a lasting solution for the political crisis. But this international mediation did not have the support of the local people at most of the time, and because the Somali there is a complete leadership failure in Somalia. The leadership is not very creative. Whenever there is a new government, there is a new group coming up because and antagonizing the new government because of the abundance of weapons in Somalia. There is no security apparatus that is able to help any government that's been put in place to settle in and restore law and order. And because of that, all the peace efforts have failed. But what they also lack is that look at Somaliland and Puntland. These two regions in Somalia, both of them had local initiatives, and they have managed to restore some sort of stability in their regions. In the south, we do not have that. We have a lot of interference from the international community, from the neighboring countries, and we have also a leadership failure in the Somali government.
But yet, even though you say interference from the Western communities, your president, Mr. Sheikh Sharif Sheikh Ahmed, actually says they need the international community to be in Somalia to help through the transition. But even as we're speaking about the transition, this national transitional, the transitional federation government comes to an end in August, or at least that's what the UN is calling for. Is that going to happen, and what can we expect after that?
What we're expecting now is the transitional period ends in August. The UN and the international community expect this government to complete drafting a new constitution, and after that period, it's not feasible feasible to hold elections. So what is very likely to happen is the extension of the current institutions, the federal, the transitional federal parliament, the justice system, and the executive branch. They will have their mandate extended, but there could be a new leadership, because by July or August it's expected that there will be a contest for the presidency, there will be contest for the leadership of the parliament, so we could have a new political crisis in the country.
And we'll be watching closely. Thank you so much for coming to give us those insights into Somalia.
Thank you.
And that's, of course, Harun Maruf, Senior Editor of VOA Somali Service, joining us here on In Focus.